I'm Dr. Karl, coming to you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the lands where we live, learn and work. G'day, Dr. Karl here, Shadows of Science. Today I'm very happy to be talking about not just recycling, but making the world a better, cleaner place by reusing stuff. So I'm talking with Belinda Chellingworth, Principal Consultant and Garbologist at the modestly named BC Consulting. Welcome, Dr. Belinda.
Thank you, Dr. Karl.
So you're not coming at it from the point of view of, hey, there's some money to be made, let's just make money, forget the world, but rather the other way around, trying to reduce waste and make the world a better place.
That's certainly been my mission for a long time, 25 years I would say now, since I was a teenager.
Beginning as a mermaid?
Well, my early career aspirations.
Yeah.
I loved nature. I wanted to be a mermaid or a zookeeper. And zookeeper was the more, I think, feasible option of the two. So I did go on to study science in biodiversity and conservation at Macquarie.
Biodiversity and conservation.
Was lots of ecosystems and chemistry and biostatistics, really understanding like how nature operates and works, how all the systems that feed us, how the water systems work as well. So that was really a good setup to be a zookeeper, which I was.
Let's go to the worst possible side, which Richard Dennis touches on in his book Affluenza, where people are in love with buying, not the actual product. So they'll buy stuff and then throw it out without even taking it out of the packet. And they'll buy more stuff. And this is the case with some ultra-cheap clothes or various electronic devices. Have you come across that and you're at the other end of the...
Oh, certainly. This is something I see daily in my work. It's not necessarily a value or behaviour that I have personally, but it's certainly a systemic issue. And I guess if I think about my lifetime from growing up in the 80s to now, it's certainly worse in some respects, that's for sure.
Sure. My daughter's boyfriend has been working in this recycling area on a sort of consultant basis and actually go drilling right down and will get into people's garbage. And they've found things like brand new expensive smartphones thrown out in the original packing, not even opened. Okay, that's the bad side. So along the way, so after doing zookeeping, you then end up going into state government?
While I was zookeeping, I was also an educator and a tour guide as well. That's the section I worked in. I guess I also realised that I liked helping people. We had campaigns we delivered to help people understand, well, how can your daily actions help the animals that you see? We had a campaign that encouraged guests to recycle mobile phones. And that's because the minerals, particularly the coltan, are mined in areas like Africa, causes deforestation of their habitat. So that's when I started making the connection between the natural world, but the materials that come into play and the products and the things that give us convenient and comfortable lifestyles. And then I did move into state government, working with businesses, helping them reduce their waste and increasing their sustainability.
You're saying that everything has a footprint. Can you sort of take us into the overall philosophy, then how you've tried to make the world a better place? And you're kind of a bit down on recycling to some degree, but let's put that into perspective. So take it away.
Okay, so everything that's in front of us, we've got microphones, we've got paper, we've got some water cups here that I can see. Everything has materials that are extracted or reused and input into them. And often when you look at the total life cycle of any product, whether it's your coffee cup or your laptop, the hot spot for the environmental impact is at the input and the extraction and the manufacture stage. So in a sense, the damage is largely done.
So when you go with bauxite and then you purify that to make aluminium oxide, then you chuck it into a smelter to get rid of the oxygen atoms, getting that original aluminium to you for whatever purpose, that's where most of the damage to the environment has been done, you say?
Yeah, look, aluminium is a good one to pick up. The reports in Australia show that between 10 and 16% of our electricity consumption is to smelter aluminium. So if we're using 10 to 16%, depends on the report that you use.
Ballpark figures say 12, 1/8.
Yeah, let's go that.
1/8 of all Australia's electricity is used to turn raw material into aluminium, which is Wow. But then aluminium is good because you can recycle it over and over.
Absolutely.
That one is fairly easy to recycle because you don't need a huge amount of temperature.
But ultimately, like, that's just one example of the overall footprint of a product, like the hotspot, and the significant environmental impact is at the beginning. So if we're going to use all this energy and input to create things, we want to value them and keep them in use for as long as possible. And I think often people go to recycling first as the solution to the waste issue. And there's a few issues with that. There's probably three primary ones.
The general public thinks recycling, wonderful thing. So let's just go through the perhaps suboptimal issues associated with recycling. And I'm guessing that you've probably got a better option, which we'll discuss after that. Yeah, okay.
Look, it's part of the solution.
It's part.
Absolutely. But when we go straight to recycling as the solution,
as the unilateral solution,
let's just recycle it all.
Yep.
Can't recycle our way out of the situation we're in. The first thing, we've talked about the impact. So we talked about the hotspot being within the primary input of any product.
Getting the atoms out of the environment into a form that we can use.
Yep, that's the first thing. The second is that when you need to recycle anything, that's intensive. You need fuel for the trucks to collect it and move it around. You need the energy, the electricity or gas to use the facilities, the equipment, fire all that up, reprocess those materials. But then the third issue is that we don't necessarily have recycling systems for all the products that we use. So when we go, oh, we'll just recycle it all, we also proliferate the issue because we're moving things quicker through the system and we're using more energy. Really, the best thing we want to do is keep things in use for as long as possible so we're not remanufacturing, transporting, moving, recycling, remanufacturing over and over. It's better to just use one product for as long as possible one time without having to solve this issue all the time.
When it's no longer useful to you, that product, you should sell it at a garage sale or pass it on?
Well, reusing everything that we possibly can and extending its usable life is certainly the way to go. And this is where we get into principles of the circular economy.
The main impact happens as you manufacture it. Now, what's the second issue with recycling?
So the second issue is that to recycle anything, you need more fuel, you need more energy, you need trucks to move around, you need trucks to collect it, move it from point A to point B, often to point C and D.
Huge input of energy, although when energy comes entirely from renewables, that'd be less of a problem.
That will be less of a problem,
Okay,
yes.
and then number three?
We can't depend on recycling systems to recycle because we don't have them. They don't exist first.
Not properly in Australia. Like I remember in Germany, there's different inputs for green glass and clear glass and brown glass, whereas here all glasses are mixed with metal and paper. So we're not doing as well as Germany.
Because countries overseas do have some more sophisticated recycling systems in some contexts, but they also are smaller countries, so you don't have to move things as far. They've got larger population densities as well. So once you start working in the recycling industry, economies of scale become really important because you want to be able to move large amounts of material between small distances as much as possible and recycle them and try and keep it local. And you need millions, billions of dollars to create recycling systems and industries. So if you don't necessarily have the tonnages to warrant that, then the economics don't necessarily stack up. So that's a challenge we can also have in Australia because it's such a large country with a disparate population.
But you mentioned economics, but then there's short-term versus long-term economics. And if you can treat the air as a free garbage dump, economics are there to go and dump stuff into the air, bad smells and so forth.
I think there's also many economic issues and what we call market failures as well in our materials systems. And that's really a design flaw. So we don't necessarily design products and systems sometimes for the things that we buy and we use. Often, sometimes it can be just cheaper to landfill it. So we don't have the economic driver to incentivise things to be collected and reused or recycled sometimes.
The cheaper thing depends on long-term and short-term. And so consider you might have an 8-year-old niece who's a wonderful person and enriches a family but has a terrible disease, which you can fix for $10,000, and that person would then grow up and pay taxes. But in the short term, just let her die because the funeral's only $2,000. And that's kind of the thinking that we've got when you say it's cheaper. We're always talking short term, like it's cheaper in the next 4 hours or the next month, but not for the country which will be here for the next few centuries at least.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone knows someone, a young soul in their life. And I think I'm at a point now where I feel, and have always felt, responsible. There's that saying, you borrow the earth from the next generation coming. And that's, I guess, how I've always thought about the environment and materials myself. You're right. There can be a lot of short-term thinking, involved in the material space. That's for sure.
Okay, so we're heading towards the big picture, which I'm guessing you'd call a circular economy, of which recycling has its place, but it's not the universal cure. That's what I'm getting from you.
Yeah. So if I unpack that, the circular economy is based on 3 principles. The first is to design waste out of systems in the first place.
Design waste out of the system. So that's from the manufacturing and then during the life of the product.
Yeah. So the second principle is to keep things in use for as long as possible. And then the third principle is to regenerate the system from where those materials came. And maybe I'll run you through an example.
Please.
Using a TV.
Yeah.
So let's think of the circular economy as a clock face. So we'll start at number 12 and we're going to use a telly. So at 12, we're using the raw materials or the reused materials or whatever we need. So the plastic and the metal to create the parts for the TV.
And it'd be probably maybe 40 or 50 different types of atoms in the
Very
TV.
complex.
Oh, yeah. Rubidium and silicon, all sorts of crap. Okay, yep.
Absolutely. So we're at 12.
Yep.
At number 1, we're assembling the TV, but we're also hoping in a circular economy, the designers have made sure that it's going to be durable, that it's also going to be repairable. So they're ingraining that thinking and engineering it from the start to enable that.
Oh, so you can pull it apart rather than having it glued together so tightly that when you try to pull it apart, you damage both sides.
That is a great example.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we want that thinking we're at number 1. So then we assemble the TV, we move it to the retailer, and we go in as a regular person and we buy it at number 3. So we got our telly. We take it home, we use it, we get down to let's say number 5 or 6. And let's hope we've used it for a number of years, like maybe let's go 5 at least. So it hasn't broken after 1 year and we have to just go send it to e-waste. So we're at number 5 and we can then, in a circular economy, go and get it repaired. And we can do that at a price, this is really important, much cheaper, let's say actually, than just going and buying a new TV. We would have access to someone that can do it, the spare parts would exist, and we are enabled to do that.
Ah, because sometimes the spare part's not available.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or it's really expensive. You go to get something repaired, it's like, it's $600 and a new one's $200. So.
And also the new one's got more fancy features and you can't upgrade the old one.
Okay, so we get it repaired. Let's say we get up to number 9, many more years go by, and we need to get it repaired again. So we go and do the same process. But then we get up to number 10, technology have moved on and the software upgrades, and inevitably we get up to 11 and then, it breaks and we really do need to place it. And that's where recycling comes in.
That's the last ditch.
That's the last so we definitely want to recycle it, that plastic in the middle, back into a system and close that loop and then have them remanufactured into a new product. And that is how a circular economy would work.
Because on one hand, with regard to getting gold, there's a higher percentage of gold in e-waste than there is in the raw or out of the ground.
I've heard some pretty crazy stats on the amount of gold that's already in circulation. So if we've got all this material in things that give us useful lives, particularly electronic goods, and those are increasing, we want to make sure that they've got longevity, but we've also got systems to recycle them at the end. So we're valuing all those minerals and the ore and the oil and all of that resource, because a lot of it's finite as well.
But you tell me about reuse. So suppose your TV's a bit old, can you then sell it second hand for somebody else who doesn't need such a fancy TV or is...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that could be an option somewhere along the line.
As part of the reuse thing?
Absolutely. Reuse is really important. But if we have everybody thinking, oh, I'm going to buy a TV and upgrade it after a year and I'm going to sell it secondhand, then you flood the secondhand market. So there's a bit of a balance. Like we want to, ultimately, it's better if people are enabled and we design things properly so that we can use things for as long as possible, and then it's desirable for people to reuse them as well.
What about the third letter R, the reduce thing?
Okay, so if we look broadly at systems and all the things we use in our daily life, there's a lot of things, and people often ask me about plastic. What can we do about the plastic problem? And to me, there are two very separate, let's say, camps of plastics. There's the single-use unnecessary, so like shopping bags, single-use coffee cups, cling wrap, those types of things. But then there are plastics that certainly play a pretty important role in a lot of the things we use daily. Things like my bike helmet is made of plastic, and I really like my bike helmet. My mouse that goes with my computer in front of me. And so again, this is where when we focus on the reduce, there's plenty of items that I personally decided a long time ago. I thought, you know what, actually, they've got the embodied energy in them. They are not recyclable. It just made sense to me to try and reduce them and eliminate them from my own personal life as much as possible. And I started doing that very slowly over time.
You mentioned cling wrap. On one hand, I love cling wrap because it reduces the wastage of agricultural products, fruit, veg, etc., from the supermarket to home. But on the other hand, it is terrible in the sense that it's made of a fossil fuel-based material that firstly creates microplastics and secondly is thrown away after a single use. It turns out we can make perfectly fine cling wrap from soybean waste, which has the advantage of being recyclable in that you can chuck it into the compost if you have access to compost. And then as a separate side issue there, we've got the whole microplastics thing where in 2021 we invented the word plasticenta to refer to the fact we were finding microplastics in human female placentas after women had given birth, and now we've found them in testes and in sperm and in every drop of rain that falls out of the sky, top of the Mount Everest, the bottom of the Marianas Trench, and roughly 7 grams of our brain is microplastics, 0.5%.
Wow.
I mean, and that's because the fossil fuel companies make so much money out of selling the raw feedstock to make the plastics. So it is not in their financial interest short term to recycle them or to reuse them, which is very unfortunate because we don't know if this is related, but the sperm count and the fertility in males and females has dropped by 50% over the last half century.
Really?
Well, here's a question without notice. How many people do you know personally who have gone through IVF in the last 20 years?
I'm going to go 14.
How many people
least.
did you know 20 years ago that were doing IVF?
We were a lot younger back then, Dr. Karl.
True.
But
it wasn't common, was it?
It wasn't as common.
No. Talking to people and finding, we're giving up now. We've been through 14 cycles of IVF. And it's just seeing it over and over and over again. Is it related to microplastics? We don't know. But anyway, getting from these plastics, one thing that we can do and to avoid plastics is to use raw materials from the organic environment. For example, wood we can treat to make 3 times harder than steel and as transparent as glass. We don't need to take carbon atoms from underground. But getting back to your thing there, the cling wrap you mentioned is a bad thing because of where it comes from now, but that in the short term suits the fossil fuel companies, but not us and our children and their children, our future generations.
My motivation in the first place was, yes, this is a petroleum-based product. It's a single-use product as well, so it's designed to be used once and chucked out, and there's no recycling system for it. And so to me, I was using it one day. I went to put a bowl of salad in my fridge and it was covered in cling wrap, and I went, I don't want to use this stuff anymore. What could I do instead? And I just got a plate and I turned it upside down. I put it on top of the bowl. I put it in the fridge and I went, simple. Does the same thing. Suits me fine. And that was a long time ago. And it was for things that I put in that camp of unnecessary, single use, designed for you to use lots and lots and lots of them. I really just tried to circumnavigate the system and go, all right, well, how can I find something reusable, eliminate this in my own life because I don't want to be part of that system and contribute to it either. And that was almost my, in a way, my little protest as well. And it made me feel better. I felt good every time I figured out a way to go, all right, single-use shopping bags. I'm going to build the habits. I'm going to give myself a bit of time for that and use a reusable and build that habit into my life. Bubble wrap. I get that plastic bubble wrap when people, deliver. You get the deliveries, it comes in. That is perfectly reusable. It's clean. It's not contaminated with anything. And I'll either put that up for free on like Gumtree as free moving supplies so someone else can reuse it, or even my local framer for large amounts, they will take it because they wrap frames in it. And so I would just kind of find ways to reuse things or not use them at all. And that was my way of implementing the circular economy in my own life.
So on one hand, you're following the Gandhi principle of be the change that you want to see. But what about at the higher level, at the political level where they make the laws and pass them?
I think there's a huge opportunity to make better policy, and a lot of that could be done. It's been very recycling focused over the years, and as we're seeing, that's not necessarily working. We need the policy to really help with that reduce and avoidance piece, and we need durable products being imported into Australia. A lot of stuff comes from overseas. Having businesses take responsibility for the products that they sell as well through what's called product stewardship. So that means the manufacturers, the retailers, they have to play a part in creating a system for when their business or their customers, so you and us at home, are finished with products and they financially contribute to systems that collect, reuse and recycle them. So we could have much better policy there. I think we have a commitment in Australia. It surprises people to learn that we are committed to halving food waste in Australia by 2030.
So I'm surprised. Tell me more. I had no idea.
A lot of people don't. And it's actually dials up to a UN commitment. So you may have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. So in the whole world, all the UN member states who've signed up to the Sustainable Development Goals have inherently signed up to a number of sub-goals. And these are for shared prosperity and peace on Earth. So there's all sorts of topics within there to do with equal rights for work and water use and biodiversity, but there's a resource use, number 12 in there. And one of the sub-commitments is to halve food waste around the world. This is a global problem, but it's an Australian problem that we have. So we've got that commitment and it's certainly being worked on, but I think there's some good inspiration we could take from other countries. Like France is a good example. There's certain supermarkets of a certain size. They're not allowed to throw out edible food. They must donate it to people in need. So that would be a practical example of how we could kind of dial the policy up. In the Netherlands, they ran a huge national campaign to help people at home reduce their food waste. And we've just launched that in Australia called Unwasted. That's very new.
When you say we, you mean high political or you personally? Or
Oh, sorry. No, I can't claim responsibility for that. The federal government.
The federal government has done that?
Yes. This is hot off the press.
Okay, so we're talking in the later part of 2024.
And often it surprises people to learn that the majority of the food waste that we generate in this country actually comes from our kitchens and our households at home. When you look at farms, when you look at retailers, pubs, clubs where we eat out, the majority is in our kitchen. So that's somewhere where we can get on board, and that's not necessarily all on government policy. They need to help us do that.
You've covered such a wide range. How can people learn more about your work and how to follow you and work with you and become your student?
We start with my business, so it's called BC Consulting. My website, I've actually written 2 reports on how to implement the circular economy day to day in your own life and in a small business.
And your website's called?
bcconsulting.au. I also am on ABC Nightlife every couple of weeks, so you can tune in there.
On the government radio?
Yep, that's it. My Instagram, it's a bit of fun. It's at the Aussie Garbologist. And on LinkedIn, it's just my name, Belinda Chellingworth.
Well, thank you for opening my eyes and pointing out that the whole recycling thing is a part, but it's not that the reuse and the reduce have their part to play as well.
Aside the environmental benefits, there are economic and social benefits too. A landmark study in New South Wales has just shown that the reuse sector creates 25 times more jobs than recycling per tonne of material.
25 times more jobs per tonne of material if you reuse rather than recycle.
That's it. The numbers are in. It's pretty clear now. So it's really about just supercharging and helping us create these economies and systems and behaviours. And I think joy, is what I've always experienced from doing this for other people.
Well, thank you very much, Belinda Chellingworth, Chellingworth, for taking us through this circular economy thingy that is incredibly important for our next generation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Karl.
Shirtloads of Science is washed, spun and aired by the University of Sydney.